My guest today describes himself as a white, heterosexual, middle-class, cis man. That is, someone who hasn't got much to complain about. But as a male feminist, Laurent Sciamma's stand-up comedy asks, why don't boys play with Barbies? Why must women uphold such high beauty standards? And why can't some men accept that the Me Too movement is a good thing? Well, he's with us in the studio, so we'll try to find out more. Laurent, hello, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now,
It's
your comedy show, Bonhomme, it means guy, dude, or man in English. It sees you describe life as a male feminist in 2019. Now, the author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, wrote, "We should all be feminists." That message was taken up by Beyoncé, by the fashion house Christian Dior. We didn't hear a lot of men saying that, though. Why do you think that is?
That's a tough question, and I guess we could say that it's hard to look at your privileges, and I guess Frenchmen have real trouble with this. And we know we are a really patriarchal country, and so it's even harder here. Yeah.
Okay, so they didn't want to lose some of that power.
Of course.
Of the patriarchy. Now, as well as being pro-women's rights, you have got a fair bit of criticism for men. This is your take on the patriarchy and their use of power.
Comment tu veux ne pas avoir honte, sérieux? T'as vu tout le pouvoir qu'on a et t'as vu ce qu'on en fait? C'est quand même incroyable parce qu'on a tous les leviers du pouvoir. On a toujours eu tous les leviers du pouvoir. C'est politique, économique, industriel, culturel. Oui. Et donc, ça dit quoi le bilan? Qu'est-ce qu'on fait? C'est genre, on opprime les femmes, on fabrique des armes, on fait des guerres, on détruit la planète et on adapte Boule et Bill au cinéma. Woo! Grand chelem, les frères, grand chelem.
So men sound a bit doomed. I mean, what would they need to do to remedy this? What do you advise them?
I don't know if I'm the good person to advise them, but I think we need to look at ourselves in the mirror, ask ourselves some good questions, important questions, how on our behavior, our political stand, and we need to be solidaire.
Show solidarity to women.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing to start, to be, to se serrer les coudes and to be together if we want to, because I think it's our problem too, because we're part of the problem, or we're the problem, but we're supposed to be together in this.
So you need to be an ally, that's it.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about your childhood in this show. You're growing up with two sisters, and you mentioned that sometimes you preferred to play with their toys than the boys' games in the playground. Now, the toy manufacturer Mattel has just announced they're going to make a gender-neutral Barbie, that very famous doll. Do you think gender conditioning, football for boys and dolls for girls, is still a big deal today?
I think it is, but I think we're on a good way. When I see the new generations, I am really hopeful. When I talk to people, to teenagers, like young women from who are 20 years old, I feel like they are more deconstructed and that they are more free, and that's really moving for me. And when I see like what happened this summer with the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, I feel like it's really starting to change, and I know that the little girls saw this and were like, okay, I can do this, I can play football, and that changes everything.
Sports have been really important in that one.
Yeah.
Now, staying with that notion that girls have more gentle games and boys are a bit more aggressive, you also mentioned that you were a bit different at school. You shied away from conflict, from anything that was a bit violent, but getting up on stage and doing stand-up can be a bit brutal. How do you deal with hecklers?
I have the chance to not having to deal that much with hecklers, but it's true, it can be brutal, it can be violent, because it's a scene where there are other comedians, and so it can be competitive, and so you can find yourself being in the same situation that it was in school or in sports or whatever. But I try to protect myself from this, and also the main thing is to create a link with the audience, and this is a warm link. And I have to say, hecklers are not often in my audience.
Okay, so they're kind to you, that's good.
Yeah.
Now, 2 years ago, the Me Too movement kicked off, and despite the fact that women were getting their voices heard more and more in the mainstream media, there were skeptics, things like the hashtag #NotAllMen. And then here in France, women like Catherine Deneuve criticised this overly politically correct approach when it came to the seduction of women, for example. That was seen as a very French response from Deneuve. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's really French, and I was a bit ashamed because it was the message we were sending through the world. I mean, I love comedy, and I watch Saturday Night Live every weekend, and they were doing a sketch about this, a bit about this, and so I was like, okay, so yeah, we're French, and I was thinking that it was a moment that we were supposed to show another image of us, but also it was really us. A moment of truth, because we have to look at ourselves in the mirror again and watch our culture and there's a rape culture in our country that it has always been there in arts, in novels, in literature, and it talks about this, like how we're supposed to behave with women, what is normal, what is not normal, and we can compare with other countries and we see that it's not the same standards.
Indeed. Now, cultural differences in attitudes to feminism, sexism, and political correctness are not the only things that can vary on opposite sides of the Atlantic. American and French humour are said to be very different, although some stand-up comedians might make you think otherwise. A few artists here in France have been accused of stealing jokes from American routines, with well-known comics Gad Elmaleh and Jamel Debbouze in the firing line for translating sketches and recycling other people's material. But in the fallout of that scandal, one industry insider says we could be moving towards a new school of comedy here in France. Let's hear more from talent scout Gérard Sibel.
Here in France, over the last 2 or 3 years, not long at all, there's this wave of creativity coming back. And despite the fact that the internet has changed things, we're seeing young artists, both men and women, who really write fantastically well. It's a sort of renaissance in terms of quality of writing. We're seeing totally new ideas emerge. It's just astounding. It's encouraging. You can't imagine how new this is. It's as if the French sense of humour is being revised. We can only hope so anyway. And I think this is going to be apparent in mainstream comedy within 3 or 4 years.
So if, like he says, we're seeing this renaissance in French comedy, what do you think characterises the material from this new generation?
Maybe something more intimate, trying to relate on new stuff, and also new references, new stories, new faces, more diverse, younger, fresher. So, yeah, I think it's a really interesting time for French comedy.
Indeed. Now, a different example of English-speaking and French-speaking comic exchange is Fleabag, the series that was written by British comedian and actress Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She won a few Emmys for that recently, and it's been adapted. She is the queen of comedy now in Britain. Yeah. It's been adapted into a French version, Mouche, starring Camille Cotin, who's very well known here. Do you think in cases like this, the humour can be translated?
I think it's difficult because Fleabag is really, really British. And I don't know if... Yeah, I think I didn't watch the French version because I was too moved by the original one. It was enough for me and for my heart. But yeah, I think it's really complicated. And I want to think that Fleabag is a new character, as we were talking, is like a new face, new culture, new stories, and it's more. It would be more interesting to ask ourselves, okay, what's the French Fleabag, and not okay, how can we make Fleabag French? Who is the French Fleabag? Who is this character? What's her story? Because and how does she talk? How does she move? Who's her family?
Because it wouldn't necessarily be the same as the British one.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Now, as well as talking about feminism, your show also talks about what it is to be a man in the world today and the fact that men are conditioned not to talk about their feelings. What is so taboo about feelings?
That's a good question. I think it's about fear. And I think maybe it's because we didn't learn how to do this. And but it's not an excuse because... I think we didn't want to learn to do this, because it's also really associated. I don't know if I can say this, but it talks about this is a thing girl does, and you're not supposed to do this because it's a sign of weakness. It's a sign of weakness, and you're supposed to be strong, and you're supposed to be the person in charge, and so we still live in a culture where talking about your feeling is something weird when you're a man.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that's changing, and maybe it will with your comedy.
I hope.
Now, finally, we asked you for a cultural tip, and you pointed us in the direction of a TV series directed by Rebecca Zlotowski. It's called Savages. It's a contemporary political drama set here in France.
Yeah.
What's so gripping about that?
It talks also about what we were talking a few seconds ago, which is new stories, new faces, and something that talks about France now. And it's really moving to see a great series and also, like something really French. We were talking about, adapting Fleabag in France. Okay, but this is something French that can touch other people in the world, but that talks really a lot about us now, and us with our diversity, and it's really, I had a Republican emotion when I watched this series. It's really great.
It turned you into a patriot. Well, thank you very much, Laurent
Thank you.
Sciamma. We'll leave you with a clip of that series, Savages, and you can check out Laurent's show Bonhomme at the Café de la Gare here in Paris on Monday evenings till the end of the year. Remember, you can get more arts and culture on our website, and you can keep up with us on social media too. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.
Le mal est là, tapi en chacun de nous. Nous sommes capables du meilleur et nous sommes capables du pire.
Monsieur le Président de la République française.
Les plus civilisés des hommes, les plus parfaits sauvages.